October 15, 1943. Over the green mass of Bougainville. The air was already thick with moisture before the engines ever started at T. Torrekina airstrip. Marine pilots from VMF 124 walked toward their aircraft in silence. The runway was pierced steel planking laid over mud. It flexed under my boots. The jungle pressed in from all sides. Nothing about the place felt permanent. The aircraft waiting for them was the Vought F4U Corsair, new to combat, powerful, and still distrusted by many pilots. Its engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800, could deliver more than 2,000 horsepower. It was fast in a dive. It climbed well. It carried 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns with a combined ammunition load of roughly 2,300 rounds. That ammunition would not last long. The mission briefing was brief and blunt. Japanese air activity had increased in the area. Fighters were expected. Pilots were warned not to chase enemies too low or too far north. Fuel margins were tight. There would be no room for error. Among the pilots was Kenneth A. Walsh, a first lieutenant at the time. I am 25 years old. Compact. Quiet. Not given to speeches. He had already been in combat long enough to know that survival depended less on courage than on discipline. At T0830 hours, Corsairs lifted off in pairs, engines roaring against the jungle wall. The aircraft climbed east, then north, forming loose elements at altitude. Visibility was good above the cloud layer. Below them, Bougainville looked solid and unmoving. It was anything but. Japanese radar stations on nearby islands detected the American formation almost immediately. T approximately 10,000 feet. Walsh's section was vectored ahead to investigate reported enemy movement. The radio traffic was clipped. Bearings. Altitudes. Short confirmations, then the sky changed. Dark shapes appeared ahead, glinting in the sun. Not one or two. Not a small patrol. A formation of Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, later estimated at more than 20 aircraft, was moving south toward Allied positions. They were spread in altitude, disciplined, clearly searching. The Japanese pilots had numbers. They also had experience. Walsh's wingman called out the contact. The rest of the Marine formation were scattered, some climbing, some repositioning. For several critical seconds, Walsh's Corsair was isolated. One aircraft, alone at altitude, facing a formation that outnumbered him by more than 10 to 1. The math was simple. The Zero was lighter, more maneuverable at low speeds. Its pilots favored tight turns and coordinated attacks. A group this size could divide, climb above, dive below, and close from every direction. Walsh had seconds to decide. He could turn away and attempt to rejoin friendly aircraft. That would mean exposing his tail during a shallow climb. Against that many fighters, it would be fatal. He could dive. The Corsair's speed would give him separation, but only temporarily. The Zeros would follow. Fuel and altitude would vanish quickly. Or he could attack at T10,500 feet. Walsh rolled his Corsair onto its back and pushed forward on the stick. The aircraft dropped into a steep dive. Airspeed built rapidly, 300 knots, then more. The engine held. The airframe shuddered but stayed intact. He aimed directly at the center of the Japanese formation. The first pass was violent and brief. Walsh fired a 2-second burst. Tracers walked across the lead Zero. Pieces broke away from the fuselage. The Japanese aircraft snapped into a roll and fell out of formation, trailing smoke. Walsh did not watch it hit the ocean. He pulled through, rolled hard, and climbed back toward the remaining fighters. His turn radius was wide. He felt the G-forces compress his chest. The Corsair bled speed but gained altitude. Now they were on him. Zeros peeled off in pairs, diving from above and below. Cannon shells streaked past the canopy. The Corsair shuddered as rounds struck the wings. Fabric torn, metal punctured. Warning lights flickered, then steadied. Walsh tightened his turns only when necessary. He avoided horizontal turning fights. He used vertical space, short climbs, hard dives, always moving. He fired only when the sight picture was perfect. Another burst. Another Zero staggered, then disintegrated in midair. The radio was chaotic. Calls overlapped. Warnings came too late. Walsh did not respond. He was breathing hard now, jaw clenched, shoulders rigid. His right leg trembled against the rudder pedals. The ammunition counters ticked down relentlessly. The Japanese pilots adjusted. They stopped attacking individually. They began to bracket him, one group climbing high to force him down, another waiting below. Walsh felt the trap closing. Fuel gauges dipped. Oil pressure held. The engine temperature climbed but remained within limits. Every decision now had consequences measured in seconds and feet. Below him, Bougainville's jungle filled the windscreen. Above him, more Zeros rolled into the attack position. He was still alone, and the fight was only beginning. Walsh pushed the nose down again, trading altitude for speed. The Corsair responded immediately, the heavy engine pulling him through the dive. Airspeed climbed past 350 knots. The control forces stiffened. The aircraft felt solid, but unforgiving. There would be no room for sloppy movement at this speed. Zero crossed his path from right to left, too fast for a firing solution. Walsh held his fire. Ammunition was already below half. Every burst had to matter. Behind him, tracers stitched the air. He felt impacts, sharp, metallic thuds through the fuselage. One round cracked the canopy frame. Another tore through the outer section of the left wing. The Corsair stayed controllable. For now, he leveled out just above 3,000 feet, then pulled up sharply. The maneuver forced two pursuing Zeros to overshoot. One flashed past his left wing tip, close enough that Walsh could see the pilot's helmet. He squeezed the trigger. A 1-second burst. The .50 caliber rounds struck the Zero's engine cowling. Flames erupted immediately. The aircraft rolled inverted and vanished into the jungle canopy below. Walsh did not slow his climb. He rolled right, then left, forcing another attacker to break off. His arms were beginning to ache. Sweat ran into his eyes. He blinked hard, keeping the enemy in sight. The Japanese pilots pressed in tighter now. They were disciplined. They no longer attacked singly. Two aircraft dove from above while others waited, circling, forcing Walsh to react continuously. This was the danger of numbers. Not one fatal mistake, but exhaustion. Approximately 2,000 rounds fired. The Corsair's guns were already approaching depletion. Walsh checked his counters again. Less than 40% remained. Fuel was down as well. He had been fighting for more than 10 minutes. That was an eternity. A Zero came head-on, cannon firing. Walsh held his course longer than instinct allowed, then snapped the Corsair into a high-speed roll. The Japanese rounds passed where his cockpit had been a fraction of a second earlier. The maneuver cost him airspeed. The Corsair shuddered near the stall. Walsh kicked the rudder, dropped the nose, recovered just in time to avoid another diving fighter. The sky was crowded now. Everywhere he looked, there were aircraft. Zeros above. Zeros below. Zeros crossed his flight path in every direction. He was no longer hunting. He was surviving. Radio calls broke through the static. Fragmented. Urgent. Other Marine pilots were engaging separate enemy elements closer to the beachhead. No one was in position to help him. Walsh felt a sharp jolt as another round struck the fuselage. Warning lights blinked again. Oil pressure dipped, then steadied. He forced himself not to look at the gauges for too long. Fixation would kill him faster than any bullet. He rolled inverted and dove again, using gravity to escape the tightening ring. The Corsair screamed as it accelerated. The Zero pilots followed, but they could not match the speed in the dive. The gap widened, slightly. At 1,500 feet, Walsh leveled out and pulled up hard, bleeding speed deliberately. One pursuing Zero overshot again, unable to slow fast enough. Walsh fired. The burst was short. Precise. The Zero disintegrated in a spray of fragments. 4.4 confirmed kills. Possibly more damaged. But there were still too many. The Japanese pilots changed tactics again. Instead of chasing him, they climbed away. High. Above him. Waiting. Walsh knew what that meant. They would force him down. Toward the jungle. Toward the coast. Toward altitude where the Corsair's advantages disappeared. He checked his fuel again. The needle was moving faster than he liked. He could not keep this up much longer. A Zero dove straight down at him from the sun. Walsh saw it late. Too late for a clean break. Cannon shells tore through the Corsair's right wing. The aircraft lurched violently. He fought the controls, muscles straining. Smoke filled the cockpit for a moment, then cleared. The engine still ran. Rougher now, but running. Walsh exhaled slowly, forcing his breathing to steady. Panic would end this in seconds. He climbed again, shallow this time, conserving energy. Another Zero cut across his nose. Walsh fired reflexively. The guns rattled, then stopped. Silence. The triggers were dead. He checked the counters. Empty. .6 machine guns. No ammunition. The Corsair was now a fast, heavy glider surrounded by enemy fighters. Walsh did not hesitate. He pushed the nose down and ran. The Corsair dove toward the coastline at full power. The engine protested, but held. Zeros followed, firing intermittently, conserving their own ammunition. They knew he was finished. They only needed time. Rounds struck the tail. The controls grew sluggish. Walsh fought to keep the aircraft stable, using trim and rudder to compensate. The water rushed up beneath him. The coastline flashed past. He crossed over Allied-controlled territory at low altitude. Barely above the treetops. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from below, friendly fire. Black bursts filled the air behind him. The Zeros broke off, unwilling to chase him into the flak. Walsh did not slow until he was certain they were gone. Only then did he begin the long, careful climb back toward Torquemada. The Corsair shook with damage. Fuel was nearly gone. Oil streaked the windscreen, but it was flying and against the odds. So was he. The landing would come later. For now, the sky finally belonged to him again. The Corsair touched down at Torquemada with less than 5 minutes of fuel remaining. Walsh kept the landing fast. He did not trust the damaged control surfaces. The aircraft skipped once on the steel planking, then settled. When he cut the engine, the sudden silence felt unreal. Only then did he notice his hand shaking. Ground crew ran toward the aircraft. They counted the holes first. More than 100 strikes across wings, fuselage, and tail. Several rounds had passed within inches of the cockpit. One had shattered part of the armor plate behind his seat. Another had cut control cables that had somehow continued to function. Walsh climbed down without ceremony. He removed his helmet and leaned briefly against the wing, breathing hard. His flight suit was soaked through. His legs felt weak. The intelligence officer met him before he reached the dispersal area. How many? The officer asked. Walsh paused. He did not speculate. 4 destroyed, he said. Possibly more damaged. Witness accounts from other pilots and gun camera footage would later confirm 4 Japanese fighters destroyed during the engagement. Several more were damaged. The enemy formation had broken off its approach to Allied positions. That afternoon, maintenance crews examined the Corsair in detail. They concluded the aircraft should not have made it back. Structural damage alone was enough to recommend grounding. The engine had been hit twice. One more round in the wrong place would have ended it. The psychological weight set in slowly. Walsh sat alone that evening, replaying each maneuver, each near miss. The fight had lasted roughly 15 minutes. It felt much longer. There was no celebration. The air war over Bougainville was intensifying. Tomorrow would bring more sorties. October the 17th, 1943. 2 days later, Walsh was back in the air despite the damage to his aircraft. He flew another Corsair on a combat air patrol over the same area. Japanese air activity remained heavy. The pressure had not eased. That morning, radar again detected incoming enemy fighters. Walsh climbed with his section to intercept. The formation encountered a mixed group of Zeros and dive bombers. This time, Walsh was not alone. The engagement was chaotic. Multiple turning fights developed at different altitudes. Traces filled the air. Walsh focused on one Zero pursuing a fellow Marine pilot. He closed from above, fired a controlled burst, and watched the enemy aircraft spiral down. Minutes later, he damaged another Zero, forcing it out of formation. Then the decision came. Fuel was low again. The sky was crowded. Walsh saw an opportunity to pursue a damaged enemy aircraft, but doing so would take him away from the formation and closer to Japanese-controlled airspace. He broke off. The decision likely saved his life. By the time he landed, intelligence officers had already pieced together the scale of Japanese losses over Bougainville that week. The Corsair squadrons were proving their worth. Enemy air attacks were becoming less coordinated. The balance was shifting. In the weeks that followed, Walsh continued flying combat missions. Fatigue accumulated. The strain showed in small ways: slower movements, longer silences. A carefulness that bordered on grim. On November 13, 1943. During another engagement over the Solomon Islands, Walsh's Corsair was hit again, this time critically. The aircraft became uncontrollable. He bailed out at low altitude and was rescued by Allied forces after hours in the water. He survived the war for his actions over Bougainville in October 1943, including the engagement in which he fought vastly superior numbers alone. Kenneth A. Walsh was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation did not dramatize the fight. It listed facts: numbers engaged, aircraft destroyed, damage sustained. The math was there for anyone to see. The air war in the Pacific was not decided by single engagements. It was decided by accumulation of experience, of aircraft performance, of pilots who learned when to press and when to break away. Walsh's fight over Bougainville mattered not because it was unique, but because it was representative. A single pilot, a single aircraft, a moment when technology, training, and judgment intersected under extreme pressure. The F4U Corsair would go on to become one of the most effective fighter aircraft of the war. But in October 1943, its reputation was still being written, one engagement at a time. So was Walsh's. He never claimed the impossible. He never embellished. He simply flew the aircraft as it was designed to be flown, made decisions measured in seconds, and survived when probability said he should not. The math said he should be dead. History recorded otherwise.